Today, we made an offer that the Ukrainians have accepted, which is to enter into a ceasefire and into immediate negotiations to end this conflict in a way that's enduring and sustainable and accounts for their interests, their security, their ability to prosper as a nation. I want to personally we both want to thank the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, His Majesty, for hosting us, for making this possible. They've been instrumental in this process, and we're very grateful to them for hosting us here today. And hopefully we'll take this offer now to the Russians. And we hope that they'll say yes to peace. The ball is now in their court.
U.S. policy vis-a-vis Europe and U.S. policy vis-a-vis the European continent, on which there is currently a war that, guess what, the U.S. is backing. The U.S. is the most significant player on the Ukraine side of this war from the start and even from before the start. That is the entire point of the Ukraine war. Ukraine would not be able to go up against the Russians if not for U.S. support. And a very interesting parallel to the way that the Russians never would have been able to go up against the Germans in World War II without Lend-Lease. But of course, that's a story for another day. Why was it that the U.S. was sending so much money and material to the Soviet Union even before the Germans had invaded, which was long before Pearl Harbor? Funny how that stuff works. Funny how much support for commies that we saw out of those administrations in the 30s, 40s, and 50s. Gosh, I just don't know what it is. And so when you look at what's going on now, though, folks, and President Zelensky, so all of the meetings going back and forth throughout Jeddah, Saudi Arabia yesterday, Rubio and Waltz there, the big question was this ceasefire. And the ceasefire comes down, of course, with the conditions. So the conditions for Ukraine, they're talking about a total and complete ceasefire. Originally, Zelensky, who, we were there with, I accompanied, of course, Secretary Bessent. We went to Kiev for the presidential complex a few weeks ago. That was the first iteration of the mineral deal in Ukraine. I want to also welcome in here the Salem Radio Network in Hour 3 of the Charlie Kirk program, that the mineral deal has still yet to be signed. No economic tie has been established between the United States and Ukraine. We'll see what comes of that, but it looks as to this point, it's not signed. What else is not in the deal at this point? No security guarantee. That's something that Zelensky really, really wanted, and of course he pushed for that when I was there with Bessent. Then, on the backside of all this, what are we also hearing? So Ukraine has agreed to a 30-day ceasefire. However, the ceasefire will not go into effect until Russia, or if Russia were to agree to it. On the flip side, we are also seeing, remember that intel that was turned off? Well, the intel is turned back on, as well as the resupply of aid and weapons to Ukraine. This was part of the conditions that were agreed to there in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. But the Russians have not agreed. And here's the calculus on the Russian side. The calculus on the Russian side is, why agree to a ceasefire when it's the Russians who are on the advance in Kursk, the Russians who are pushing the Ukrainians out of Kursk? There was this pipeline operation outside of Suja where Russian troops were trudging through a pipeline for 12 kilometers, about 6 miles through a pipeline to come up and attack the Ukrainians for the rear. Now, this area of Kursk, this is a portion of Russia that and this is Russia proper. This is not one of the disputed territories where the Ukrainians had pushed a salient into with their army and have been able to hold for several months at this point. And of course, the Russians have been pushing to get them out. Now the Russians have cut them off completely. They've attacked them from the rear. They've attacked them from Russia's own border, from their own border. And this land of Kursk, this area, and I've gone on War Room for over the past couple of weeks walking through this battle. This is the land where in World War II, the largest tank battle in human history took place, the Battle of Kursk. The closest that the Germans ever got to Moscow was the Battle of Kursk, and this was held right there on that land. And in fact, the Ukrainians, through NATO, what's the armor? What kind of armor are the Ukrainians using when they're rolling into Kursk? They're using German armor again. They've got German Panzer howitzers, and they've got German Leopards. So German tanks rolling in to Kursk. When you hear that, how do you think the Russians are going to react? So the Russians have reacted the way that you think they would expect. Their blood memories have been completely activated, and they're wiping out those units. They're going village by village, settlement by settlement in this area to really take out this Ukrainian army. Many of them have surrendered, but many of them are fighting to the last man. There's also a few remnants, but it's mainly a mop-up operation at this point. So From their perspective, the Russians say we're on the advance. We've got momentum on our side. Why pause? Why pause and allow the Ukrainians time to rearm and resupply and go get more ammo from the United States? Why not keep going just after the Ukrainian army suffered this major collapse in Kursk? And so it remains to be seen. Now, that being said, of course, what does Russia want at the end of this? At the end of this, it's not about Russia and Ukraine from their perspective. From their perspective, and something we're also hearing out of the White House, it's all about the relationship and the rapprochement between the United States and Russia, peeling Russia away from their alliance with China, the BRICS alliance, breaking the back of BRICS. And of course, where else do you see this? You see this with de-dollarization. This is also part of the de-dollarization that BRICS, China, Russia, India, Brazil, South Africa, that's what they're all pushing for. What is President Trump doing? President Trump is trying to re-strengthen U.S. manufacturing. It's all interconnected and inextricably linked. And when Mike Benz was on here yesterday, we walked through the economic arm of the Third World War. And we explained that President Trump is deconstructing the globalist American empire, deconstructing the global economic system, and doing so in a way that's going to put you, the American middle class, the American worker, the American taxpayer, in the driver's seat, not the elites anymore, none of this. So what does it all come down to? And how are the globalists responding? Well, let's talk Poland for a second. Why does Poland matter? Well, Poland matters because they've got an election coming up in 2 months. Now, that's a presidential election. Why does that matter? Well, Romania just tried to have a presidential election. They elected a guy for president. The EU didn't like that. They didn't like that one bit. His name was Calin Georgescu. They really didn't like him being elected. So the EU put pressure on Romania. A Romanian court overturned the election. And then another Romanian election authority, one of these, post-communist kind of structures, came in and ruled that Georgescu can't even run for president again. So they've stripped him from the ballot. And remember, that's what they were trying to do to President Trump here in the United States. This is what happens in these post-communist, post-Soviet countries. So Ukraine is right next door, by the way, to Romania. And so what do we have? We have a situation where the globalists didn't like the candidate who won. They canceled the election, and then they stripped his ability to run again. That's in Romania. Well, the next presidential election in the EU for one of these countries is Poland. Is it possible that what the globalists just did, and the globalists, these are the people who control the elites of Davos, this is the city of London, is it possible that they want to do the same in Poland? Was the stripping of the presidential election in Romania a test run for what's going to come in May in Poland? We'll see. All eyes are on Europe.